Hello and welcome to this episode of sMater, a podcast by clinicians for clinicians, brought to you by Mater, an Australian leader in healthcare for more than a century. I'm Gillian Whiting and I'm your host, coming to you from Meanjin, the land on which this podcast is being recorded.
And I'm Dr. Maria Bolton, GP specialist and former president of AMA Queensland.
Today we're joined by Clemence Thompson, who's in the midst of her breast cancer journey.
We are Mater.
We are Mater.
We are Mater.
This is sMater.
Clem, welcome to sMater.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I think it's really incredibly valuable to hear from someone in your position, a patient who is still undergoing treatment. Can you take us back to before the diagnosis? You're now a 35-year-old mother of two. Did breast cancer ever cross your mind?
Not this young, certainly. My mother-in-law has had it 4 times, so I certainly knew that breast cancer, was around, and it was certainly something that you be concerned of as you get older, but not at 35. It never crossed my mind that would be what I would be facing.
And you were breastfeeding at the time when you first felt a lump. I mean, what was your experience then?
So my daughter had quite bad feeding issues, so I was exclusively expressing. And I had a really bad oversupply. I just had a large oversupply. So I constantly had blocked ducts, lumps. It was just all very part of the process. So it was as I was weaning her off the pumps when she turned 1 that I noticed the lump on my right-hand side. But that's where all the blocked ducts, like on both sides, but that's where they were. So it was just in my head, just a residual blocked duct. And I didn't really think anything of it at the point. It was only as sort of 6-8 weeks went by, I'm like, oh, there's still that lump there in the back of my mind. And that I was like, oh, maybe I should get something checked. But it's still never did I think it would be breast cancer.
So it was the fact that it was still there after that time that you thought, I will get checked. So you just went to the GP but still weren't overly concerned?
Yeah, so I was actually on a work trip and I was talking to a lady who had just come out the other end of her treatment. She was in her 50s, but she had mentioned that sort of 10 years before she'd had a lump that was benign but had to go into yearly testing. And I was like, oh, I've got a lump. And as I said, it'd been in the back of my mind, but it was sort of enough for me to go, yeah, I'll go see my GP and just kind of rule out that it wasn't anything, or at least if it was benign, kind of start that preventative screening. But there was no family history or anything to sort of trigger me to go, oh, I should be worried.
And what was the process like from first seeing the GP with the lump and then getting referred to having all those scans?
Yeah, so I went in to see my doctor who was, he's like, yep, let's get you referred. We went with an ultrasound technique and, recommended I go to a specific women's clinic who sees, day in, day out these sort of scans. Again, was kind of similar to me in terms of going, it probably isn't anything. It's probably just breastfeeding related. But he said there's no harm in checking, and so referred me immediately. Took me a couple of weeks to get in, and then Remembrance Day has a whole new meaning for me, but went in for the ultrasound. Took a little while, and then they got the ruler out. I was like, this is taking a while. And then she said, can we do a mammogram and some biopsies? I'd just been talking to a lady who'd said it takes 6 weeks to get her mammogram in, and I'm like, I'm getting pushed to the top of the list. This can't be good. And then when she said to me she wanted to take a biopsy of my lymph nodes because they were a bit prominent, I knew then that I was going to get some good news. But and then, the next day they'd said it would take till the Thursday, so this was the Monday, till the Thursday to get the biopsy back. I got a phone call the next morning from my GP before the clinic opened to say, could I come and see him? And I was like, haven't even got the biopsy back. Why am I going in? What does he know? But he said, I don't need them back. Based on the scans, he knew that I had quite advanced in terms of it was in my lymphs. So he didn't wait. He's like, no, we're not waiting. I don't need to wait. I know it's just confirming the type, really. It wasn't. He said, I don't think it's going to come back not cancerous. So, yeah. And then assortment of scans, overwhelming number of scans in that next week.
And then the roller coaster just begins at that point, doesn't it?
How bad, where, what do you got, So it's just so unknown at that first early stage.
So your GP referred you to Dr. Ben Lancashire, breast cancer surgeon at Mater Private Hospital, Brisbane. Just in terms of being a patient, I mean, what's it like to wait for, your appointment for the scan, for the breast surgeon?
I'm very lucky in that, as I said, scan Monday, Tuesday morning he saw me, and he had actually moved his morning patients, rescheduled them so that he could just sit with me, work it through. He waited till Ben's office had opened and actually personally scheduled the appointment and said she needs to be seen immediately, and I actually got in the next day. So thankfully, because I'm a terrible waiter, it was very quick, and the Ash, the breast care nurse, they actually rang me later that day on the Tuesday. So I didn't have much waiting, which was very, very fortunate, because the waiting is the worst. It's just waiting to find out and waiting for the scans. And like I had a PET scan the Thursday, I had an MRI the Friday, oncologist the Monday. Like there was not, like as much as all those scans are very overwhelming, I didn't actually have long in my head, which is not a bad thing, because the longer you spend in your head, the harder it is just waiting.
And what were those initial discussions with Dr. Lancashire like? I mean, how did you work? What treatment pathway was best for you?
Yeah, so when I saw him on the Wednesday, we had 2 of the biopsy results back, still waiting on 1. So he had ruled out that it was hormone negative. We're just waiting on the HER2 to come back. But because it was hormone negative and in my lymph nodes, he said, we'll do chemo first. So he'd sort of already worked through that would be the most appropriate plan. So he had sat with my husband and I around the type of cancer that I was looking at, noting the HER2 was still unknown at that point, which I turned out to have. That was a positive the next day, but he'd already sort of worked through that based on the scans. I could see it was in obviously multiple lymph nodes, worked through why I would have a PET scan, why he wanted the MRI, just to sort of help with the treatment planning, but kind of referred me to the oncologist straight away to get the chemo plan started. So yeah, he was, and he read me quite well. He knew that I wouldn't wait, and he, had the PET scan. I think that night at 9:00, he rang me to tell me the results rather than waiting for the next day. He read that in me, and he rang me to tell me what the results said instead of I making my own conclusions from Google.
And I speaking of Google, I mean, we all Google, right? It's a human thing to do. But what resources did you find helpful at that early stage when, I mean, there's a lot of new words like HER2 and PET scanning?
Yeah, so I'd certainly started to Google the different types. Like I didn't know there was all these different types of breast cancer. I just knew there was breast cancer. And it had sort of, because we hadn't told my mother-in-law at that point, because we didn't want to open up the trauma of all of that. And my husband's dear grandma, she's 101. I was like, I can't do that to her. I can't tell her. And so we hadn't really gone that path yet. So I'd sort of been doing some Googling around the type that I had. But of course, Google just tells you that it grows really fast and all these things. So I sort of stopped Googling pretty quickly. I learnt from parenthood, Google can be your friend, but it can also be not so good because it tells you too much information. So I sort of just stopped and waited for Tech to Ash a few times, waited for Ben. Dr. No called me each day for the process to sort of check in. So I sort of relied on that process more than Googling.
And what about well-meaning, often people wanting to share their experiences, their advice? How did you get through that, and do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so we sort of kept it to ourselves because as I said, it was very heavy news and it was coming up to Christmas. So we'd sort of told the family, but we hadn't really gone much further. I did call the lady from work who had told me about her, and she'd sort of given me a few tips, but she was like, this is the hardest part. Believe me when I say this is the hardest part. So I sort of just had to be patient, which is not a skill of mine, but I'm sure this is what it's trying to teach me, that I was in the best care. And I just had to, breast cancer is unfortunately so common, but it also means people know what they're doing. It's a well-oiled machine at this point. So I just had to trust.
And you mentioned Ash. Do you want to tell us who Ash is?
Yeah, so Ash is the breast care clinical nurse attached with Ben Lancashire's office. So she called me the Tuesday afternoon, had received the referral, ran through a few things, organised the PET scans, MRIs, like she did all of the logistic stuff. And then I met her the next day on the Wednesday, and I was sitting in the waiting room and there was, women probably in their 50s and their 60s. What did I do wrong? Why am I here? I don't feel like I should be here. But, she took me in and very much my vibe, like just read me well, knew what I needed, joked, kind of, I tend to make humour out of something and she was very, very my vibe, which was great. It helped to relax us a bit. And I think my husband, who was a bit, had seen his mother go through it, I think she sort of helped put him at ease too, which is good.
Mater Private Hospital Brisbane is one of Queensland's leading centres for breast cancer treatment. An accredited centre of excellence in breast treatment, the hospital supports around 500 new patients each year and performs more than 100 breast reconstructions annually.
Can you talk us through your treatment? It's different for everybody, often very complicated, step by step, and where you're at now.
Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, I did chemo first. So I did 2 chemo drugs and 2 sort of targeted therapy drugs initially for 6 rounds. And then after the 6 rounds of chemo, I then did mastectomy and lymph node removal surgery, continue with the targeted therapy, which is still ongoing. It will finish in November. And then in June, I did 3 weeks of radiation. So what's kind of left is just targeted therapy until November, and then I'm choosing to have a preventative mastectomy on the other side and a reconstruction, like a tissue reconstruction, in February next year.
So that will be 12 months since
Yeah, so November will be 12 months, and then because of the radiation, the skin obviously tightens. They recommend 6 months between the two, and December, probably not a great time to be out of action with young children. So yeah, we've put it in for February next year.
Amazing, isn't it, that if breast cancer hasn't crossed your mind and your thoughts of what happens, and then the process and the complication and the time and the
such a marathon. I think even watching my mother-in-law go through it, you don't appreciate it, and it really gave me respect that she's had 4 rounds of chemo, 4 lots of radiation, I was like, oh my God, we were so selfish. But really, I think you just don't realise it until you're in it, just how long the process is. And it does look different depending on the type that you have. But yeah, as I said, I'm sure it's trying to teach me patience for how long it goes. But yeah.
So you mentioned this has been a marathon and it's still not finished yet. What do you wish more people, particularly clinicians, knew about the process and how to best support people like you?
Yeah, so I think, that it is definitely a marathon, but probably I think people know that chemo's tough. Like most people are like, oh my God, chemo. But I think when you finish chemo, they're kind of like, that's the hard part, you're done now. But often it's got side effects post-chemo that people, I think it's easy to brush over because you start to look, your hair grows back, you look less like a cancer patient. But some of those impacts are so lifelong, and depending on the hormone type, breast cancer, where they block all the hormones and everything. Like the stories that I've heard from women, and I think it's quite easy to gloss over those long-term side effects because they're out of the heat of the kind of chemo. So I think just for them to keep in the back of their mind that it's not over in terms of, yes, the cancer might have disappeared, but the long-term side effects for these women will go on.
And the extra challenges for you parenting young kids. How old are your kids?
Frankie's almost 2 and Fletchy's 5.
I don't know if this is possible to answer this question, but how do you manage parenting through that?
People often say what was the worst side effect of chemo. Having to parent was certainly up there. But do you know what's funny? It actually made it in some ways easier because you have zero time to dwell on yourself, and they force you to be active. And I actually think being active helps you get through chemo, moving kind of. But it probably puts more pressure on. So my husband, I feel like, took the brunt of that parenting over the 6 months, and Frankie had just turned 1 and was a terrible sleeper. Oh, terrible. Up 13 times a night. And then, don't get sick. Every round did she get sick. So, the heightened nature that goes with no immune system, sick kid, poor husband, who I was like, I've got it. I can get up. He's like, you can't. I'm like, believe me, for all of our sakes, I will get up for her tonight because you need to sleep. So I think it's tough. but I think it's actually tougher on the support, like the other person with the caring, because they do take the brunt of it. And, you know, for me, I didn't want the kids to know. Like, obviously with my hair and stuff, Fletchy knew. He just thought it was funny though. But I do remember we're at the park and he's like, Mum, run around. I'm like, oh, bud, I'm a bit tired. Just can't get tired. You're not allowed. I'm like, oh, right. I didn't know that. Sorry. But it did actually, you don't dwell. So you sort of have to keep going.
So you made a decision not to say to them,
no, we did tell Fletchy. Okay. He's pretty inquisitive. Like the day I came home with the from the biopsies and had the band. What's that Band-Aid for? What happened? Because Band-Aid's very cool when you're 4. So he knew, and we didn't want him to. We just sort of didn't say cancer because Dave's mum had cancer and she actually is going through it again now and likely to be the final time she goes through it. We didn't want him to associate the two things in his mind, that we had the same thing. So he kind of took away from the stories that I had monsters in my boobs, and we just had to get some medicine to get them away. And I was like, sure.
That's great. You should use that, Maria. That's a great story, isn't it? Monsters in your boobs.
And for him, it worked. And when I lost my hair, he thought it was hilarious. He told all of his friends that I could headbutt walls now. Don't ask me where he got it from. But that made it a lot easier. He didn't really have an anxiety when Mum would walk with him, you know, either with a scarf on or often I just went bald, and it didn't bother him in the slightest. He got really annoyed when people would look at me and he's like, I don't understand. So, you know, we were as open as we could with him to make him, and even when I had the mastectomy, so, you know, I didn't want him to think it was a thing that his mum only has one boob. All of prep know that I only have one boob and that I have an insert. But again, we just kind of rolled with it because he's obviously very comfortable, and I would far prefer him to be comfortable than have a lot of anxiety about what it means, which I think is, if you were to get cancer as you're older, the anxiety for your kids is a lot more. As I said, I'm sort of glad I got it. If I had to get it, I got it when they were young because there was no anxiety for them.
Thought about writing a book for people in your position, because I think these are great stories and those lovely little bits of advice that could help someone else in your position too, couldn't they?
So
I'll leave that with you, Clem. You can decide whether to do the book or not.
We've been sharing a lot on Instagram to sort of help that awareness, and it actually has helped me give it a purpose, because there's a lot of taboo around young cancer, I think. So it's been a journey for sure. But
I love that idea of a book, particularly aimed at children. Children are so perceptive, aren't they? I mean, they know there's something going on.
And they are far more resilient than we give them credit for. So I think, you know, and trying to hide it from them, they'll know. And then I think if you do try to hide it, they'll then wonder why you did try to hide it, versus just being, I think, as open with them. As I said, there was zero anxiety from Mike. He thinks it was hilarious that I had no hair, and he told everyone. And, you know, mums would ring me going, oh, my kid came home saying that you've lost your hair and that you're headbutting walls. Is everything okay? And I'm like, oh, interesting. But I think trust the kids that they'll be okay.
So, I mean, as a side, you've also raised money for breast cancer causes. Your sister shaved her head, your husband waxed his legs, ouch, and you've even taken part in a powerlifting competition. What has all that meant for you?
Yeah, so honestly, it's helped give it a purpose. I think for me to accept that I got it so young, I had to, as I said, give it a purpose. So I decided around the Christmas time that it was to sort of raise awareness. And my sister, a few wines in, dropped that if we'd raised 10 grand, she'd shave her head. Well, challenge accepted. So we quickly put out a fundraiser, and we had 10 grand in an hour. And then and then it just built. Like, her partner was like, all right, if we get to 20, I'll do mine. And in the end, I think we had maybe 13 people shave their heads, another sort of 10 or 12 cut to make wigs for kids. And then my husband, because he already has quite short hair, he's like, for every 200 we raise, I'll wax. Well, my sister, to have the rights to shave my sister's head went for $1,800. So that was already 9 wax strips. So he quickly regretted his decision. His legs were bare by the end of it, for sure. So, you know, that was amazing. It truly carried me through chemo to see the support. And then, so that was in March. We sort of had the big fundraising event and raised about $40,000 for that. And then Sarah, who is the world's strongest powerlifter, had actually shaved her head for part of it. I didn't know Sarah. She was like a connection through my sister, and she had reached out to say that she had this powerlifting comp in September that she wanted to cross with my fundraiser. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. I don't even know Sarah. And then my sister came up with a great idea that I should enter it as one tit wonder. And I was like, oh God, no, I don't know. But then I thought about it and went, you know what? It'll get me out of bed. It's a good fitness goal to regain my strength post-surgery. And here we are, about to compete on my first and probably only powerlifting competition, but it's been really fun, actually.
You said at the beginning that you think this is perhaps to teach you patience. I don't know. You seem to be getting busier and busier.
I don't sit still very well at all. I went back to work kind of second round in, and work, they were amazing. They sort of came up with a support structure that would work. I was part-time and, with chemo you go in and out, but they knew I wouldn't sit still well at home. And as I said, for me, it helped me get through because it kept me busy. I didn't dwell on it. And I do truly think the more you move and the more you keep busy where you can, like obviously not too crazy, you actually will get through, and it gives you quite positive mental health.
According to Breast Cancer Network Australia, up to 50% of people with early breast cancer experience depression or anxiety within the first year of their diagnosis.
When, just taking you back to when you were diagnosed, when you first saw your GP, what made you feel heard?
So, well, I think the fact that he called me before the clinic had already opened and that he'd rescheduled his morning. I knew that I was his priority for that morning to sort, and I could also he was clearly upset having to tell me that news, which was so hard because I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry you have to tell me this news. He's like, why are you worried about me? And I'm like, 'cause this is, our kids are the same age. So it felt very real, and I could see that he genuinely was distressed having to tell me the news. And then, obviously waited for my husband to get there, and then, he called Ben or Ben's office. But then at the end, he'd said, I've made a note on your file for you and your husband and kids. Anything, just walk in, don't book an appointment, because he's quite hard to get into. So, we had this flag on the system to say that we could come in at any point, which at the time I was kind of like, oh yeah, but you don't, my kids were in daycare both kids were in daycare at that point. They get sick all the time. And as I said, it takes on a whole new meaning when you're doing chemo. So he truly showed us that he cared, and that it wasn't just me. It was the whole family unit that he was, wanting to support. So, it was great.
Because you were such an unusual case, really, young, breastfeeding mum, very busy. Is there anything, looking back on that you wish GPs would perhaps keep in mind when they are dealing with people like you in an unusual situation?
I think probably trust that the person knows that there's something up, because they probably wouldn't be there. They've probably put it on the back burner, as I did, for a couple of months. So it's probably, if there is something there, it's probably more advanced than say someone older. And B, just because they're young doesn't mean it isn't. And I suppose that really speaks to me, because my daughter's director of her daycare had said to me, once I sort of announced that I had it, that she'd had a lump for a couple of years, but her doctor kept telling her it was nothing. And she's like, I just feel like it is. And I said, go see a different doctor. And it took her a little while, but she did. She is now going through chemo. It was quite advanced by that point, but it was the hormone one and quite slow growing. So I had 2 years ago, and she'd said she'd been to her GP like 5 times. And it sort of reinforced my commitment to sort of go, it is possible in young. We see it. So if they're willing to go and have the scans, I just think trust them. It is better that they have the scan and it be told that it's nothing than now she's had a full lymph node removal. She will have ongoing side effects for the rest of her life now because they caught it so late. And I'm just like, I'm just so glad that my doctor was like, nah, we're getting it tested. It probably is related to breastfeeding, but why take the chance? And here we are. So I think just trust them.
Yeah, I think it's important that you rule it out, right, regardless of your age. And sometimes because the screening guidelines start with women in their 50s, even though if you're over 40, you can still get access to breast screening. But sometimes when you have someone in that younger group, it's just remembering that you still have to rule it out because cancer happens at any age. We're seeing that in bowel cancer too. We're seeing people presenting much younger. And you're right, you have to listen. You have to listen to the patient. And same with parents. I worked under a pediatrician, and he said to me, if the parent is worried, you need to take that extra seriously. You always have to make sure that you take the patient's concerns.
Oh, 100%. I remember going in about something for Frankie, and my doctor was like, look, mother's instinct. If you think it's an issue, I will refer you. And he didn't question. And that's, I was talking to my husband last night about this podcast today, and we both said that the true difference with our GP versus others is he trusts that we know we're not just there because something. Like, he's always said, okay, let's check, because from our we would rather check than not. And I don't think a lot of GPs, I know they're very time poor and the health system's certainly very busy, but you wouldn't feel like that with ours. Like, he trusts you and he will refer. So I think, our intuition is strong. I think we should get, people should get more credit for it. And it may be nothing, but hey, I'd rather have been told that it was a benign lump than what I did get told. So, I think if they're willing to pay for the scans, because that's the other thing, the scans under 40 are obviously not, maybe a little bit Medicare, so they're quite expensive. But if the patient's willing to pay for that, then why not?
Now, Clem, in November, as we mentioned, that's when your targeted therapy ends. And you begin the next chapter of this journey, so radiation, mastectomies and reconstruction. So coming up to that point, what does that represent to you, that moment, and how you're feeling about it?
Yeah, so I've had the radiation. So November will kind of close the treatment journey, which will be good. I think daily, because I've been working in young kids and everything, obviously with all the medical appointments, but I think it will sort of just almost be a sigh of relief. Like, I've sort of been told because the chemo worked very effectively, and then the surgery that sort of I had a complete pathological response. So there's not the stress that goes with, is it working? But I think just the relief knowing it's finished. And then so reconstruction's in February. So it will just be sort of, to me, that's the finale that I am looking forward to just sort of close it kind of completely. And I think for me, removing the other side will just kind of put my mind at ease that I won't be coming back to this sort of journey anytime soon, hopefully, and hopefully never.
What are those discussions around reconstruction like?
The first one, I don't think I was not prepared, in the sense of, in my head, I was kind of like, implants, I suppose. I just hadn't really thought about it. And then I remember texting Ash, because I got the referral, and I was like, oh, why am I getting a referral to a plastic surgeon? Is Ben not doing the surgery? And she said, oh, no, he'll do your surgery, but because you'll need a mastectomy, just talk through your options. And my plastic surgeon was lovely, but I was not in my head prepared for him to tell me that he was going to cut other parts of my body to transplant up. And I was like, oh my God. And he's like, most women have some extra skin. I'm like, oh, I don't think I have lots of skin to just move around. And it was incredibly overwhelming, I will admit, that first appointment. And he said, you may have quite an out-of-gap payment because Medicare's your private health might be a bit funny with the reconstruction. And so it was really, really overwhelming, that one. But then we went back in maybe just before my mastectomy or just after, and I adjusted to it. I was like, okay, yep, that's fine. The first surgery was like, wasn't too bad. Like, I was up moving pretty quickly. The recovery wasn't too bad. So I think I was like, all right, I can handle the next surgery. And for me, having one boob's just, I can't do it. I don't like it. I know some people do, but I was like, nope, I am definitely having reconstruction, and with the radiation, I can't have implants. So I kind of just accepted it and moved on. But I was like, oh my God, you're going to do what? You're going to cut me and transplant me? And you're just like, that's amazing medically. Oh my God. But I'm going to have scars everywhere at this point. So yeah, it was a bit, but anyway, we got there.
It sounds like there's still a lot of advocacy work to be done when it comes to covering costs and out-of-pocket gaps when it comes to, for example, the the imaging and the reconstruction work, right? And that might be prohibitive to patients.
For sure. I think that first day of scanning, maybe around $800 I was out of pocket, which for some would be very much difficult in terms of getting to that point. So I think I opted to go private with my treatment, and private there is still a lot of out of pocket, which is very much a learning for me. I thought private just meant, you paid your excess, but no, obviously quite significant out of pocket for different things. And then the reconstruction, it's barely covered, which fascinates me, that a surgery that is not, yes, it's cosmetic and not life essential, but it's not at all. Like, it's for a young woman having one boob, it's quite daunting. It's, I think that there's a big difference between having breast cancer when you're 70 to have breast cancer in your 30s in terms of what you're doing, your active lifestyle. Like, I go to the beach, you can't just wear your prosthesis at the beach. You have to get a special one. Some mornings I get dressed in the dark to go to the gym, and I've got like a little knitted knocker. I don't put it in right. I'm like, why is everyone looking at me? And then I look down, I'm like, I didn't put it in right. Like, there's lots of things there that I think, but to be told, like, it can be up to $30,000 out of pocket if you go private. And I know you can get it done publicly, but the wait list is quite substantial. So yeah, I do think they don't realise the impacts especially emotionally, I think. Like, I know mine's only short term, but I think if it was years, it would do my head in, I think, not having symmetry.
Yeah, something for the federal government to look at, right? To increase those Medicare rebates for.
And I think
those
they shouldn't
surgeries.
see it as cosmetic.
Yes.
It is not a cosmetic procedure. And the fact that, it's way more expensive than implants, it's not the patient's fault. They needed radiation, therefore can't have implants. So yeah, I do think it's an area that they've sort of glossed over because it's not a young person's.
We can add political lobbying to your children's book and your fundraising and your powerlifting, Clem. Keeping very busy. Thank you so much for joining us on sMater and sharing your story. It's with such honesty and strength. It's been really valuable for us and also all of our listeners as well. Clem, thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
For our listeners at home or in the car or just having a well-deserved break between patients, thanks for tuning in.
See you next time on sMater.